This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, global markets pretty much shrugged off U.S. President Donald Trump's second impeachment and focused instead on reports that his successor, Joe Biden, will lay out a new $2 trillion stimulus plan. Now, emerging markets hit record highs as investors seemed optimistic about easy monetary policy and stimulus measures. Meanwhile, MSCI's index of emerging market equities rose 0.1% on the day to hit a record high for a second consecutive session. In Nigeria, we continue to see bargain hunting in the shares of most blue chip stocks today. The oil share did extend a bullish run to 3 consecutive sessions. It climbed a further 1.54% today. Market heavyweights, Dangote Cement and MTN did boost the bourse further. They climbed 3% and almost 2% respectively. Now, also coming up on today's show, Africa to continue relying on safety measures against the coronavirus despite the promise of vaccines. Zimbabwe records a rise in consumption of locally produced goods. And the adoption of online systems boosts small businesses in South Africa. Now, vaccines might not be Africa's antidote to the coronavirus pandemic, at least not immediately. Although the African Union has secured 270 million vaccine doses for the continent, that will only cover around 10% of Africa's roughly 1.3 billion people, and that's when administered at 2 per person. The potential limitation in vaccine distribution flags a concern that more prosperous regions will get an unfair head start in the global fight against COVID-19. However, the director of the AU's Africa CDC says the vaccines will be rolled out in a way that populations can develop herd immunity. Currently, Africa's second wave has not peaked and is infecting twice as many people per day, and that's compared to the first wave. Well, let's get more details on the plan for the continent from Coletta Wanjoy. She joins us from Addis Ababa, of course, where the AU is headquartered. Great to have you as always, Coletta. Now, of course, as we just mentioned, the 270 million shots will pretty much only cover roughly 10% of Africa's population. How exactly do they plan to roll it out? And give us a sense of who they say will be the 10% who will receive the vaccine.
Well, Uche, what will happen is the Africa CDC has secured a deal, if we could call that, with 3 manufacturers. That's Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. And they've said they can avail 270 million doses. Now, we're expecting to get at least 15 million doses into the continent between April and June. What will happen is the countries that will get are countries that are willing to get into this deal and team up and go in as a block. So once a country X goes in and says, I want this amount of vaccines, it will make an order through a platform, which is the Africa Medical Supplies Platform, formed by the African Union. Then it will be able to get exactly what it requested for. And this will be done through the Afri-Exim Bank. So how the individual countries will roll out will be according to a strategy that will be outlined by the Africa CDC, hopefully beginning with the health workers and then other members as more vaccines come in.
Well, Coletta, the Africa CDC also says that talks are currently ongoing with over 10 manufacturers so that hopefully we will have some vaccines soon. Any more details on that plan yet?
Well, according to the Africa CDC, it says the continent has to be flexible. The continent cannot choose whom it wants to buy vaccines from, because what we know is there's already a rush for vaccines. So currently, at least there's a deal with the three AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson, and there are many more in the pipeline that are still waiting for efficacy to be proven. So the Africa CDC says it is in talk with even more than 10 to be able to see whoever's vaccine is given the right proven to have efficacy, then and it can supply to the continent, then that's the kind of manufacturer that will go with. So it is 10. It will open up the talks with more as more companies or manufacturers bring out the facility and say that they are able to supply the vaccine. So it is a flexible talk, and with anyone who is offering something on the table and ready to supply with Africa with whatever is proven to be working.
Well, Coletta, African nations were actually relying on COVAX, which was actually meant to ensure that the equitable access to vaccines for all around the world. Now, these 270 million shots, they did not come from COVAX. Is there any news from COVAX on the available vaccines for the continent?
Well, with the deal between the African countries and other countries as well, that was done between WHO, Africa CDC, and other entities with COVAX, was that they would be able to avail at least 20%, whatever would immunize at least 20% of the population. So from this, the Africa CDC says, and the African Union is waiting for at least 600 million doses that would come from COVAX. But with COVAX, then this 20% can only be given to maybe health workers and maybe some few of the elderly people, and that's why the Africa CDC is encouraging countries actually to look at other avenues, and that's why we're seeing where this 270 million is coming. It complements the aspect of COVAX, and also the Africa CDC says it notes that individual countries are having bilateral talks with different manufacturers. For example, Egypt, Morocco, Seychelles are reportedly talking with China to be able to get vaccines from China. So it is encouraging all other avenues apart from COVAX, because the target is to immunize at least 60% of the continent's population. So COVAX, yes, is there, and we might have vaccine probably from around February of this year being rolled out. When it will reach Africa, that's another story. But at least we have 20% from COVAX. We've got 270 million from these manufacturers, and we probably have many more as more manufacturers bring out efficacy-proven vaccines.
Now, on the flip side, what did the CDC say about Africa's preparedness to receive and, of course, to store some of these vaccines, especially because we know some of them require extremely low temperatures? What did they say about that?
Well, the Africa CDC says the African countries now do not have an excuse, because at least with these 270 million vaccines, we have a timeline of between April and June. That's about 4 months from now. So African countries should have started preparing in terms of storage, because by now we know the kind of different types of vaccines that could be coming into the continent. So the Africa CDC is saying that African countries should be able to be flexible and not only choose and say, for example, we will only take this kind of vaccine that doesn't require this kind of storage. It says it could be flexible through guidelines that it will provide. For example, a country can decide that the vaccines that require maybe -20 degrees storage could be put maybe in places like capital cities or places that have access to electricity. It has given an example of Nigeria that's already looking at solar as an issue of providing enough power to store vaccines that require really low temperatures. So it is saying there's no excuse. And the fact that now the World Bank is offering at least $5 billion to countries to be able to set up vaccination mechanisms, that also gives African countries a leverage to be able to really prepare and speed up the preparation, at least before April, when we get these assured doses of 270 million and 50 million coming in during that time.
Well, many thanks for that update, Coletta. It's always great to have you on the show. That is Coletta Wanjoyi joining us there from Addis Ababa. Now, on that note, Nigeria says it is expecting to receive donations of enough COVID-19 vaccines to cover at least 20% of its population. It says it is working hard to make these vaccines ready during the first quarter of this year. Here's CGTN's Phil Ihaza reporting from Abuja.
The confirmation was made by the chairman of Nigeria's budget office, Ben Akaboeze, during a virtual conference with other government officials while deliberating on the 2021 budget. He did not specify where the donations will come from, but he says it will include at least 4 vaccines approved by different countries across the world. As well as the donated vaccines for 20% of the population, Mr. Akabueze says plans are underway to fund the procurement of at least 50% of its vaccine requirement from this year's budget. Nigeria says the country will get the first 100,000 doses of vaccines between the end of January and the first week of February without specifying whether these will be donated or purchased by the government. Already plans are underway to come up with a framework for the distribution. The government says once vaccines have been validated by the World Health Organization and the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, vaccination will begin with 50,000 frontline health workers. President Buhari has tasked relevant officials to work harder to gain access to these vaccines as the number of cases of coronavirus has begun to rise since late last year. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Meanwhile, the Serum Institute of India expects WHO emergency use authorization soon for the Oxford AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine. It will then produce this for mid- and low-income countries.
We will start stockpiling from the end of March, early April, the Novavax products. So from April to June, you're going to have a lot of manufacturing. I won't at the moment guess how much that will be, but it'll be upwards of 40 to 50 million doses per month is what we're trying to stockpile of the Novavax product starting from April, and we're in a unique position to be able to make so many different vaccines at a huge volume and capacity. So I think for an investor to come in at a 12, 13 billion valuation, it'll be a fantastic deal, leaving a lot of upside. I always give a lot of upside to my partners and investors. I believe in sharing, the success. So we'll wait and see.
Now, Unilever's CEO, Alan Jope, told Reuters on Wednesday that the company has floated the idea that it could buy shots to share with people in poorer nations. Jope said that there are 1 or 2 nations in the developing world where the public purse is not so strong and who have approached Unilever on a buy-2-keep-1 basis. But of course, it's not time to celebrate yet. The second year of the COVID-19 pandemic may be tougher than the first, given how the coronavirus is resurging. The worldwide death toll is approaching 2 million since the pandemic began, with 91.5 million people infected. In its latest epidemiological update, the World Health Organization says that after 2 weeks of fewer cases being reported, some 5 million new cases were reported last week.
Going into a second year of this, it could even be tougher, given the transmission dynamics and some of the issues that we're seeing. So we need to, really focus on taking the positives, looking at what's worked in every country, and then transferring that knowledge to others. And it doesn't matter, things have worked in communication, things have not worked. Things have worked in governance, they've not worked. Things have worked in science, they've not worked. We've got to find the best possible combination of all that learning across all of our member states, including the United States.
Well, let's now turn our attention to some corporate headlines today. Starting in South Africa, where mobile network operator Cell C has started migrating its customers to MTN's platform. This is part of a turnaround strategy aimed at reducing costs and cutting its debt that is close to $594 million. Now, the mobile network concluded a roaming agreement with MTN that will see it using its network infrastructure as it seeks to stabilize itself. Meanwhile, Egypt is reviewing a final agreement with Germany's Siemens to develop a 1,000-kilometer high-speed electric railway network at a cost of $23 billion. Work will start immediately on an initial 460-kilometer section running from Ain Sokna on the Red Sea to New Alamein on the Mediterranean coast. The initial section will conclude 15 stations and be completed in 2 years. Meanwhile, Swedish mobile phone directory and caller identification service, Truecaller, has announced its new chief financial officer, Odd Bolin. Bolin was previously Group Chief Financial Officer at Swedish cloud computing services provider Sinch, which is a company which he helped to take public. Now, Truecaller plans to go public as early before the end of this year. It has not finalized the amount it plans to raise, but it is aiming for a valuation of more than $1 billion. And French car maker Renault has pledged to slim down and focus more on technology. This is according to its new CEO, Luca De Meo, who gave his first strategy update since taking over in July last year. Now, De Meo added that he will cut an extra $608 million in costs, and he'll focus on producing a smaller number of profitable models. He also plans on cutting car production to 3.1 million cars by 2025. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let us head into a short break now, still coming up on the show. Coronavirus restrictions provide a boon for made in Zimbabwe products. And Egypt opens up its airspace to Qatar.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Well, let's go to Uganda now, where vote counting is underway following the country's highly contested elections. However, there is an internet blackout after telecom operators suspended their services on the eve of the election. Incumbent President Yoweri Museveni is seeking a sixth term in office. He is being challenged by 10 candidates, including popular musician turned opposition frontrunner Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, also known as Bobi Wine.
Ugandans adhere to COVID-19 protocols as they came out in their numbers to vote. Police officers meanwhile patrolled the city streets to ensure security was upheld. The hotly contested presidential election pits longtime leader Yoweri Museveni against popular singer-turned-politician Bobi Wine.
Everyone who is here supports the old man, and now people say that the old man has done something bad. I do not understand what that is. At this moment, everyone that was here supports him, and he will improve things here. He is Museveni, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni.
Voting closed at 4 p.m., with voters already in line allowed to cast their ballot after the cutoff.
7 has ruled for a long period, so we want a change.
For me, my vote, the one I've just put in, I expect it to count very much on my future as an individual. And as you see me, we are just looking at the change. We are looking forward for a change.
Ugandans are expecting to know the outcome of their vote within 48 hours of polls closing. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
And heading to Zimbabwe now, a silver lining has emerged for the country after spending most of 2020 under restrictions to try slow down the spread of COVID-19. Now, consumption of locally produced goods has gone up, boosting prospects for the country's efforts to revitalize local industries. CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya has more.
With international supply chains disrupted and border controls affecting movement of goods into the country, Zimbabweans have been forced to reduce their dependence on imports to the benefit of local manufacturers who've turned the tables on foreign products.
So far, we can talk about 70% of the goods that you'll find in most shelves having been manufactured locally. Actually, the reverse was true at some point, where 70% of the goods you would find in the shelf were imported, and only 30%, and that was also reflective of the decline in capacity utilization as indicated by Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries research, which indicated that capacity utilization dropped to around 36%.
The upswing is likely to be felt well into the new year.
Our prediction is by Zimbabwe is that a lot of the benefits from the lockdowns will become much more evident as we go into 2021. When the feedstock from agriculture comes out and we reduce the imports, i.e. on imports of maize, where again, we are still, even at this point, still importing maize. But I can see that by mid-year or as we go into the year, we'll reduce those imports.
The nation is reaping the dividends of currency reforms that have been implemented throughout the course of the last year. These include devaluation of the local unit from a fixed exchange rate and the introduction of a foreign currency auction system. A depreciation from 25 to $1 to an average of 81 to 1 has made local products more competitive, increasing export revenues that have resulted in a fourth consecutive monthly trade surplus in November. Statistics show that $485 million in exports was raked in, outstripping imports of $405 million. Manufacturers have had easier access to foreign currency since the weekly auction launched in June.
The participation of manufacturers and retailers is increasingly being reflected on importation of raw materials, importation of capital goods. So basically where we are now, it has given us a lot of progress in terms of supporting the local industries.
Local industries require about $100 million per month for raw material imports. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Meanwhile, Egypt has finally opened up its airspace to Qatar, just days after a quartet of Gulf countries agreed to mend ties with Doha. Now, the decision paves the way for direct flights to resume after a blockade of more than 3.5 years. As CGTN's Adel El Merhoui now reports, the move does bolster efforts to revive economic ties between the two Arab nations.
Egypt's national carrier, Egypt Air, has announced it will resume direct flights with the Qatari capital, Doha. The first flight is scheduled on January 18. But due to the current COVID-19 travel restrictions, the carrier will begin with one flight daily from Cairo.
Any added flight will increase the profit of the company if it is have a capacity of passengers. But we don't know actually how much will be the capacity, how many passengers will be filling the aircraft or not. So it's not clear yet how far it will affect Egypt's financial situation. Of course, yes. It's good for the company, and also Qatar is an Arab country, and this is good to return back to flying to Qatar.
Egypt Air is planning to gradually increase flights to Doha until it goes back to the 3 flights a day norm. 4 additional weekly flights from Alexandria's Borg Al Arab airport could be introduced once the company finds appetite from travelers. Egypt and Qatar are moving fast in normalizing ties. Hours after they signed Al Ola Reconciliation Accord on January 5th, the Qatari finance minister visited Cairo with a business delegation to revive projects that have been suspended for years.
Qatar's economy has been suffering because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the drop in oil prices, and the flights ban. Meanwhile, most of the Qatari investment during the crisis went to Iran instead of Egypt and the Gulf nations. The impact of severing ties, however, has been more evident on companies rather than the economies of both countries.
In 2019, Egyptian exports to Qatar were roughly $170,000, but they dropped to nearly zero in 2020. The banking sector in Egypt will see some positive developments, with Qatar National Bank planning to expand investments in the North African state after 3.5 years of stagnation. Real estate will probably benefit the most. Top developers from both nations had projects worth $5 billion, all of which froze with the diplomatic crisis. Resuming flights is the first step in reviving economic ties between Egypt and Qatar, as businessmen will be free to move. But more importantly, it's a huge relief for more than 300,000 Egyptians who work in Qatar. They've been suffering from long layovers instead of a 3 hours direct flight. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Now, Tunisians are eager to switch to 5G technology and expect it to be rolled out in the next 2 years. That is according to a survey conducted by the government. Users in various fields such as agriculture, industry, medical and services says that 5G will help to optimize costs as well as increase production in the North African state. From Tunis, here is CGTN's Adnan Shaushi with the details.
Karim Mahrez is a senior consultant and a successful ICT entrepreneur in Tunisia and Africa. He says that 5G's industrial applications will bring revolutionary change and will form the backbone of future economic advancement and public services.
5G is a real opportunity because it will create some 22 million new jobs by 2030. It will create $13 trillion of growth and new projects. We must understand that 5G is not like the evolution of the mobile phone from 3G to 5G. 5G is some 1 million IoT per square kilometer. 5G is the 4.0 industry, drones, digital art, connected schools with robots. 5G is also telesurgery.
Tunisia's telecoms minister had earlier said licenses suitable for the next generation of mobile broadband services could be awarded this year. The Netcom Tunisia chief executive says 5G will offer an opportunity for developing countries to boost their economies and create new jobs in new sectors. He asserts that China's Huawei is the world leader in this technology.
Huawei does not only offer this possibility of 5G infrastructure with the Internet of Things and industry-related services, it's more than that. Huawei also provides the layers above, like artificial intelligence, as well as data and privacy protection. I'm sure that many decision makers in African and developing countries are smart enough to deploy and use Chinese networks and artificial intelligence than any other competitors.
Huawei Northern Africa's vice president in charge of public relations for the Mediterranean region, Adnan Ben Halima, explains that the Chinese company is willing to install 5G technology that will help Tunisia and the world.
5G technology now is a new trend of technologies. I think it will play a very important role for the future to develop new services and provide new connectivity. We are really eager to deploy this technology in Tunisia and also in other countries in this region. Huawei is very advanced thanks to the research and development efforts that have been done recently, and thanks to the product quality and the solution that we are providing to our customers.
In December 2020, Tunisia Telecom carried out the first test call, which showed a speed of connections to the 5G mobile network exceeding 2.2 gigabytes per second. This 5G mobile test call was made with a smartphone and a modem, using the telecom company's live network. According to the ICT Ministry, Tunisia's telecoms regulators launched a feasibility study of 5G. The licenses suitable for the next generation of mobile broadband services could be awarded in 2021. Experts assert that 5G networks will change several industries. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break now, still coming up on the show. China defies the coronavirus to record steady growth in exports last year. And we look at the pros and cons of working from home.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
And here's a quick recap of other headlines at this hour. At least 18 people have been kidnapped in the most recent raid by gunmen in the northern state of Kaduna in Nigeria. Now, the attackers are said to have stormed Mando village in Birnin Gwari area on motorbikes in the early hours of Wednesday. Residents said the gunmen looted food items and later led abductees into a bush. It is not clear who carried out the hit, but kidnaps for ransom is especially common in that region. Now, rebel forces have been pushed back after mounting their closest attack yet to the capital of the Central African Republic, Bangui. The United Nations says one peacekeeper was killed in the process. Now, this latest attack follows a rebel offensive launched to disrupt a presidential election, which was held at the end of last year. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a civil society organization has released a report stating that as many as 1,200 people have been killed by militia in the eastern territory of Beni since 2019. And Kenya appears to have joined the list of nations that have detected a new variant of the coronavirus. Preliminary findings were released by the state-affiliated Kenya Medical Research Institute. Now, KEMRI said a study conducted between June and October 2020 in the southeast of Kenya detected a unique variant. It, however, admits that more research still needs to be done in order to assess the impact of this variant. And that's a recap of top headlines this hour. Now, a team of World Health Organization experts from various nations have arrived in China. They are there as part of research into the origins of the COVID-19 outbreak. The team is expected to hold meetings with Chinese scientists and conduct on-site visits. Now, commenting on Twitter, WHO expert Marian Koopman says that Asian nations require far more tests than Europe. Meanwhile, China's customs data shows that the country's exports maintained steady growth in 2020, and that's despite disruptions caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Wang Mingye breaks down the data for us in this report.
Facing unprecedented headwinds from the virus, officials say China's foreign trade sector did a stellar job in 2020.
China's foreign trade is up 1.9%, reaching over 32 trillion yuan, or nearly $5 trillion in 2020. Among this, China's exports have reached nearly 18 trillion and imports have reached over 14 trillion, becoming the only major economy to see growth this year.
The epidemic dealt a heavy blow to China's foreign trade. In the first 2 months of 2020, the total foreign trade in goods fell over 9% year-on-year in yuan terms. But the declining trend was soon reversed amid China's containment of COVID-19 over the following month.
The sound recovery momentum has been sustained. Since June, China's foreign trade has achieved robust growth 7 months in a row.
With the sector's recovery on solid ground, China has introduced a series of reforms to open up its economy.
Although restrictions were in place due to the containment of the virus, China's exports of epidemic prevention materials has been valued at over 400 billion yuan. The country has offered antivirus supplies to more than 200 countries and regions worldwide, contributing to the fight against COVID-19 on a global scale.
COVID-19 is having a significant impact on the global economy. Experts say openness and cooperation is more needed than ever for global and sustainable economic recovery. They say China's commitment to broader reforms and wider opening up will continue to inject fresh growth opportunities to the global economy. Wang Mengjie, CGTN, Beijing.
Now, an estimated 120,000 Indonesian women work in Malaysian homes as domestic helpers. But amid cases of exploitation and abuse, Indonesia now says it could stop allowing its women to keep going to Malaysia, and that's unless Malaysia agrees to increase protections and rights. Well, CGTN's Rian Melzer reports from Kuala Lumpur.
Indonesian domestic helpers in Malaysia often end up as a combination of cleaners, cooks, nannies, and more. Few get regular days off, and many rarely even leave the homes where they work. Some suffer far worse. A hostel at Indonesia's embassy in Kuala Lumpur shelters victims of exploitation or even violence.
Indonesia is seeking a deal with Malaysia to ensure that domestic helpers get 1 day off a week, get paid directly into their bank accounts, are allowed to keep their passports and communicate regularly with their families.
The Philippines has long insisted on these kinds of rights, as well as higher minimum wages for its citizens working as domestic helpers around the world.
Compared to the other countries, then Philippines does set a benchmark, and it's worthwhile for other countries to actually take a look at what the Philippines is doing right and try to emulate them.
Even the agencies who bring in domestic helpers acknowledge Malaysians are over-reliant on live-in foreign helpers.
The government should allow to bring in we call it part-time maids, so that with this part-time maid to come in, so for those small families, small houses, they may not need the living maids.
What is important also is the need for our government to put in place support systems whereby, children can be taken care of. There are government-supported nurseries, for example, facilities to take care of old people. Then there would be definitely much less reliance on the domestic workers.
Agents insist cases of exploitation or abuse are rare.
I always have faith in Malaysians. I also have faith in the Malaysian government that because our enforcement, when there are cases arise, they will really deal with it.
Such reassurances alone aren't enough for Indonesia. and with demand for domestic helpers here far outstripping supply, Indonesia may well hold the upper hand. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Kuala Lumpur.
Now, 2020 has been one of the most challenging years in decades, but there have also been some bright spots. The forced break has provided an opportunity to pursue other dreams that have turned into lucrative side hustles for some. Here's CGTN's Karina Huber with more.
Gautier Coiffard is a software engineer by day. By night, he's a busy baker, churning out baguettes and croissants. He knows bread. He's been living in New York for 8 years, but he grew up in France. He long lamented the lack of options in the city, so he gave baking a shot.
I didn't really find any good bread or not too expensive bread around here. So yeah, I tried it a few times, several times, and then, it worked.
That's an understatement. At first, he made the bread for he and his wife Ashley and a few friends. Now it's a thriving business with orders coming in from across New York City as well as Boston and Toronto. Marketed mainly through Instagram, it has brought in roughly $30,000 for the couple since June.
We find ourselves giggling at 12 o'clock at night, just wondering how this happened, because we still don't understand.
Ashley quit her job as a mortgage processor to focus on the business. She helps with the baking and the early morning deliveries. The whole experience has altered their dreams for the future.
Before June, we never thought of owning a bakery, and now we talk about it almost every day.
The disruptions caused by the pandemic haven't been all bad. For some, it's meant they now have more time to focus on projects they've long put aside. Others have picked up new hobbies they never dreamed would lead to businesses.
Pre-pandemic, Jessica Feinberg was a preschool teacher transitioning into real estate. 9 months into the pandemic, she now spends most of her days making bracelets. It's a hobby she's turned into a lucrative side hustle. It all started with a $15 loom kit she bought in March to keep her 2 boys occupied. They showed no interest, but she loved it. She soon marketed her $12 bracelets through social media. She's made around $20,000 this year.
The one funny thing is I always said I wanted to have my own business by the time I turned 40. And I turned 40 in October and I have my own business.
The bracelets are now carried by 6 retailers, and wholesalers want to work with her. She never imagined she'd have a booming business. Being open-minded is one of the many lessons she's learned in the pandemic.
Just finding the silver lining, finding what makes you happy. And this is definitely the best thing that's come out of the pandemic.
Karina Huber, CGTN, New York.
Of course, many of us have had to work from home due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, Henrik Siebrandi looks at the pros and cons of the current remote work culture.
For many folks in the U.S. workforce, their jobs require them to be out in public, hands-on, meeting people face-to-face.
We're a touching community, and we thrive off making people feel good about themselves.
But many have discovered they can do their jobs right where they live. According to a Stanford University study, 42% of Americans have worked from home full-time during the pandemic. Generally white-collar workers who rely on phones and computers.
I'd say 75% continue to work from home.
Campos EPC's Mike Venturini says his engineering firm largely emptied its offices when the pandemic began.
Those businesses that can run remotely are. There is absolutely no question about it. It's just not worth taking the risk.
Many employees have enjoyed the flexible schedules that come with working from home and a better work-life balance.
I think COVID has opened up opportunities that weren't previously considered to really think about how do we get outside of our walls more readily and more effectively.
Therein lies the challenge.
The biggest downside that we're seeing is that managers are not equipped to manage effectively in a remote environment.
Consultant Tara Powers helps companies build cohesive teams and create a culture of connection. She says today's leaders must be emotionally aware when managing employees who aren't in the office with them.
What is going on for you? What can I do to support you more effectively? Is the communication that we have working for you? Do you need something different from me?
3, 2, 1.
Home can present distractions. Virtual meetings can also be tricky.
You've got to be able to be creative, and they have so many online tools right now that are incredible. Jam boards, idea boards, things where you can work together collaboratively online.
What many wonder is, will this shift to remote work become permanent, or will offices regain their traditional role once the pandemic ends?
It's hard to build a culture in a remote environment.
Venturini envisions a hybrid model in the future.
We had a number of employees asking us, can I return to the office? And we said, absolutely.
I think people like working together. And I think that a lot of companies do better when you have your team there and you see each other and you meet and you communicate and you brainstorm.
Until that time, adaptation and innovation are the buzzwords of the day.
All of those things are being asked and required of every company in every industry.
One online survey found 29% of those working from home vow to quit if they're forced to return to the office. At least in some form, this trend may be here to stay. Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN, Denver.
Let's shift focus now and take a look at commodity markets today. A steady dollar took some shine off gold prices. And now analysts still say right now gold has a strong support at above $1,800 per ounce. And that is because the expected stimulus package will, of course, increase the inflation rate going forward. Meanwhile, oil prices dipping today after Saudi Arabia's promised output cuts did help to push prices to a 10-month high. Market watchers say technical indicators suggest oil is likely headed for a decline, with prices currently driven by expectations and not the immediate realities. Well, let's take a quick break now, still coming up on the show. Small businesses in South Africa find their lifeline in adoption of online systems.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, before the lockdown early last year, the online delivery service in South Africa was generally the preserve of established businesses which run franchises across the country. But when stringent lockdown rules were eased in mid-2020 to allow businesses with delivery services to operate, small businesses or SMEs had to rethink their strategies to remain in business. The result was the rapid adoption of online and e-commerce lines. Here's CGTN's Yulisa Njamela, who visited a small business owner called Mechanic and filed this story.
Mechanic is an innovative platform that brings qualified and trustworthy car mechanics right to your doorstep, whether it be to your office or home. They do this at a time that fits into your own daily schedule. Mechanic is the brainchild of entrepreneur Lisitla Dikhale and co-founder Tabelo Mulelu.
Mechanic is an Uber-like platform that connects customers to mechanics with trustworthy and vetted mechanics through an online platform.
It works much like a taxi e-hailing service. So, if a customer requires a vehicle to be fixed, they head to the mechanic website to receive a quote. A mechanic is then dispatched to the customer's home, work, or wherever they are located.
When they find us, they just enter a few details, which is their car details, and then they get like a quotation within it's pretty much instant. So they'll get a quotation instantly, and at that point in time, they can decide to accept the quotation, then do the whole booking, enter their details, address, make an upfront payment, and then a mechanic will then be dispatched.
The impact of COVID-19 has prompted many South Africans to opt for less contact in terms of their daily activities. And with Mechanic being an e-commerce based service, it means users do not have to leave the comfort of their homes or offices.
So I think we were always on a growth trajectory since the inception of the business, which was actually quite encouraging for us to continue. When COVID hit, it was kind of like, I think, what do they call it? We call it a gift and a curse. So I think the gift that gave us is like in the period we were transitioning from. So that's, I think, the gift. And then the curse, I guess, was like we had a very huge dip on the sales, because it was like not a lot of people were kind of like knew what they want to do, what they're doing, how they're going forward. But COVID hit, and we kind of like grew after that. And now we're back into our growth trajectory. And during this period, I think there was a lot of people doing a lot of online work.
The Soweto-born entrepreneur says all partner mechanics have been verified for their certified skill set with various vehicle brands. Dikgale prides himself in that even during these difficult times, when humanity is dealing with a pandemic that has hit the global economy, he's still able to provide employment to many.
We're actually giving people opportunities to realize that they can actually determine their own destiny and partnering with us as mechanics. We've created about over 100 job opportunities for mechanics, and it's female and male alike.
Mechanic currently operates in 2 provinces, in Gauteng and the Western Cape. Yulisa Njomela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, a Tunisian startup is offering a virtual tour of UNESCO World Heritage sites in the country. Users from around the world can now experience these cultural sites through their mobile phones or computers. CGTN's Adnan Ashashi brings us more details on that story.
The digital platform brings more than 3,000 years of Tunisian history to life. The startup behind it was created in 2018 to raise awareness of the North African nation's heritage.
We are specialized in valorizing our heritage through modern technology, especially by using virtual reality. We create unique cultural experiences in different historical sites, like this one, behind me in the Carthage, in the 2nd century BC.
Digital cultural experience collaborates with historians, archaeologists and scholars. Stories and historical events are told in a way to attract viewers of all ages.
The experience we offer is for all Tunisians, especially youths, who are invited to be proud of the country's history. This is how we encourage people to visit real historic monuments. The visit is available on the internet for any person in the world who wants to discover Tunisia's history with modern technology.
We aim to make children interested in history by making it less boring and easy to understand. Everyone has access to a smartphone or a tablet. Therefore, it's easier to learn about history while playing. Any child can have fun and play while learning about great people who made history.
The experience was developed in collaboration with UNESCO, the National Heritage Institute, and the Agency for the Promotion of Heritage and Cultural Development. The virtual tour moves through 7 World Heritage sites. Visitors can travel in time and space, from Carthage to El Jem, through Kirkwan, Dugga, Tunis, Sousse, and Qirwan. According to the latest data published by the Central Bank of Tunisia and the Ministry of Tourism and Handicrafts, the country's tourism revenues fell 64% in 2020 due to the COVID-19 crisis. Experts assert that technology and the digital experiences could help the travel and tourism industry. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, let's head back to China now, where the country's first commercial center with a high-speed rail sitting beneath the city has welcomed nearly 1 million customers since opening in the new year. Now, the sight of high-speed trains going through the shopping center has made it yet another attraction in the city of Chongqing, but its influence is more far-reaching. Here's CGTN's Mark Hare reporting.
The mountainous city of Chongqing is never short of spots attractive to locals and tourists alike. And now, there is a new site in town, in one of the oldest CBDs in the city. The new high-speed rail cuts through a business center overlapping the functions of the old Three Gorges Square, which has fallen behind amid the shooting demand of consumption.
When designing the center, we've taken metropolises like Hong Kong and Tokyo as examples. These are all regional financial and business centers with large populations and complicated landscape, and they're using transit-oriented design logics to lower the burden of heavy traffic.
The old Three Gorges Square attracted developers to build large residential centers in the district in the early 2000s, which has led to serious traffic jams. The new CBD aims to divert commuters, residents and tourists by creating a core featuring 5 types of transportation.
The high-speed train station is located on the 4th floor below ground. There are bus stations, taxi lanes, public parking, and so on. We've also designed nearly 100 elevators to help divert the 300,000 people who travel across this area.
Every couple of hours, a high-speed train like this departs from the platform and heads for Chengdu. Now that the line's speed has been increased to 350 kilometers an hour, passengers can go back and forth between the twin cities in only 62 minutes.
As the rising fourth pole of China's economy, the twin cities of Chongqing and Chengdu are looking to build a 1-hour traffic circle to lower time and costs for goods and personnel.
The TOD model is suitable for mountainous cities like Chengdu and Chongqing. First of all, a traffic core can help lower the pressure on a single form of transportation. Secondly, it helps bring more dynamic consumption to the area. The Sichuan-Chongqing region is rich in transportation resources. The key now is to bring these strengths together.
The Twin City Economic Circle has just welcomed its 1-year anniversary, and with it, over 200 projects in infrastructure, advanced technology, and the information industry have landed in the region. CGTN, Chongqing.
Well, before we leave you today, here's a very quick look at Africa's currencies. Of course, South Africa's rand rose about 0.6% to the dollar today. It still stayed within a trading range seen last week, as weak manufacturing data from the country pointed to more economic woes. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo,